Welcome to another unit in this methodology toolbox. This time I'm going to talk about how we can construct our own model, or rather what to consider in detail when you build your own model. Well, the first question usually is, do I have to do this on my own? Or can I simply use some other already existing model which I then modify, expand, or whatever? And the problem with this is, well, where do you find a model you can use as a baseline? First idea, look into the literature. Take a look what other people did. Maybe you can find some kind of publications which focus on a similar or the same topic, had more or less similar or the same research questions. So find someone whose idea is not so far off from what you actually want to do. Because, well, if they are doing something similar, they supposedly used the same approach or used at least an approach which might be with some small modifications could be applied to your question, your problem as well. Where do you find these publications? Well, you can look on Google Scholar, you can use the Web of Science, maybe you find something there. And if all of this doesn't work, well, maybe you do not find a full model which someone already built, but it could be that some partial relations of your model are already covered by literature. So maybe you do not get all the links covered, but maybe like one or two variables, the interaction of these variables, which impacts what. Those might already be covered in the literature. So you construct your own model and simply argue which of the relations is covered in, or rather with which publications, by which tests, where does empirical proof exist, something like this that you can show, hey, this model, even though I constructed it myself, is not fully an ad hoc model, but is already covered, at least part by part, with scientific research. Well, how do you construct something like this? First, simply try to come down with an idea, how could you illustrate whatever you want to do, whatever you want to study, how can you illustrate this graphically? Or if you actually need a model to be analyzed analytically, how can you model specific relations mathematically? If you use those two approaches, this helps a lot to get a first grasp on how your model should look like. And then, well, you can turn back one step and say, okay, I have the different relations I need to study. So what does literature tell me about it? Also, if you want to model something mathematically, what do you know from literature? Does literature tell you it's a linear relationship, a quadratic relationship? Which direction does the relation between two variables go? So all of this you might get from other parts you can put into your full mathematical or graphical model. Okay, if you start building your model, usually you come up with the problem that the different building blocks are not variables or things which can be measured with a single variable, but usually mean you have to use certain concepts or constructs in the building of your model. So the next question which comes up, if you actually want to gather data to fill in your model, to test your model, you need to operationalize the concepts in the model. You need to operationalize them by finding suitable scales to measure all of the different concepts. And the relating question, where can you find those scales? Well, again, turn to literature, turn to whatever people already did. The first thing, if you're working in a field of marketing, have a look at the Handbook of Marketing Scales. It's a relatively good overview on what in the last decades has been done on research on, well, the most common marketing concepts. So you can take quite a lot out of this, and the advantage of this book, you also get a very decent overview on the publications which came up with these scales. So it's not only the scale, it's usually the scale, the quality of the scale, and who introduced or used the scale. If you work in a field of psychology, especially in the German concept, you might check out the publication by Hochrefe, because they have the most common psychology scales. In other languages, there are different suppliers, but usually in each language there's like one major supplier for all the most common scales, so you can check out what they have to offer or what particular libraries have to offer where you have access to. Well, if you do not find anything in one of those two books or with one of those publishers, check out other publications. Again, take a look what other people working on the same topic have done. You can do this by simply turning again to something like Google Scholar and search for name of your concept plus scale. Usually publications which focus only on the construction of a specific scale either have the term scale in the title already or in their keywords. So it's pretty good guess that if you search for whatever plus scale, you will find a publication focusing exactly on what you want to do. Well, if all of this doesn't work, you can still build your own scale, but then you actually have to go the extra mile and ascertain that it's really a functioning scale. Well, that's then basically it on this session on how to build your model, how to fill this with suitable data later on. So I hope you enjoyed this session. I say goodbye and see you next time.